And again, I sometimes have a mic, but I didn't feel like troubleshooting that today. What's that?
That's our PowerPoint.
Yeah, I brought all this today so that you guys could see what you weren't seeing last week. I made really beautiful slides last week. I swear, it's super tragic. They were really beautiful. And you didn't see any of them. So, yeah, absolutely can. And I couldn't record them last week either because I didn't have internet access. I got like locked out because it's a new semester or something. And so there was no recording. I could upload I could upload it.
Yeah, like just slides.
Yeah, I could do that. Yeah. So we'll upload week 2s, and then we'll upload week 3s, and we'll upload the video as well, so you guys can rewatch this if you choose. Okay. So we're only missing one person. Actually, it turns out, Mona, you weren't like a half hour late. That's fantastic. All right, hold on. Is this gonna work? There we go. So last week you got me. You guys asked me about acetylcholine, and I was like, wait, I don't remember acetylcholine. It kind of slipped my mind at the time, and it took me a while to remember. I had to go look it up in the book, and then it kind of bothered me, and I stuck with it. And I went back and reread about it, and it's actually the neurotransmitter that actually relates to muscle communication, and it kind of directly affects your perception of muscle strength. So where we kind of see that is going to be like anticonvulsants. Does that make sense? So if you see a client on anticonvulsants, that's actually inhibiting the receptors of acetylcholine. And that's probably where you're probably going to run into it the most. Yeah, and there's some lists there. This is not my world though. This is more your world. So do you recognize these? I don't. But yeah, it was interesting to read about acetylcholine and then connect it to anticonvulsants and realize, oh yeah, that's why clients come in feeling heavy when they start the anticonvulsants. It's the acetylcholine receptor inhibitor. So if you would like, I found this really cool, fantastic drug chart, which you might want to take a look at in your free time, and you might use that down the road for other resources. It's just this enormous chart that if I was a student, I would probably want to make sure that I kept track of that. So yeah, so I'll post this online, take a look at it. You might say, ooh, I'm going to favorite that, because you might use that in a different class. Seems like something that could be a quick reference. And then let's see here. Yep. So, and then I posted some research on how acetylcholine is a release inhibitor in some of the research for the NCBI. So PubMed right there. All right. So, yep, I learned a little bit this week. Thank you. So stimulants. What do you guys think about the stimulants section of the book?
It was longer than I expected.
Me too. Yeah, me too. No, I'm right there with you. Yeah, it was long. Sometimes I'll repeat just for the sake of congruence, just because I don't think it'll pick you guys up. I'll repeat, to try to make it sound congruent, but it was long, longer than I expected. And I think it's a longer chapter. I think it is. And even though it was long, it was actually missing sections that I'm really surprised that it was missing. And I added a whole bunch of slides almost angrily. And then I actually took them out, like, no, don't do that. Like, I took them all out, and it was like, no, don't do that to them. So I'm not bombarding you with all the stimulant slides, and maybe that's because you guys can take those on in your personal projects or something, and maybe I'll leave those as like, consider studying this as your personal project. Like smoking cessations was just underwhelming, or some of the politics around cocaine versus crack was just underwhelming, and it was not addressed adequately in that textbook. So I don't know if it was in other editions, or if this edition, or if any of them have just never covered it, but that wasn't okay. So other things were done well though, I think. I believe, if I remember correctly, 65, what was it, what the statistic, 65 million, I can't remember, I'm not gonna remember the numbers on stimulants, but stimulants are the most widely used drug in North America. It's actually the most widely used drug in the world, probably the most documented, and probably has the most social acceptance. It's probably the only drug that we could probably safely talk amongst ourselves about, like, what's your experience? Because like, by show of hands, how many of us had some version of caffeine this morning? You know, it's like, maybe not all of us, but some of us, you know, and I only drink black tea. There's usually some social acceptance around that in almost any circle. We were talking about even in some religious circles that exclude caffeine. I wonder if black tea is even on that list, but maybe it is, maybe it isn't. But stimulants are common, and they date back, you know, thousands of years in terms of recorded usage. One of the main themes that's important to remember that's different about stimulants than other drugs is that it actually causes the release of endorphins, your body's own natural endorphins. And that's different than like a drug that's mimicking an endorphin, or a drug that's tricking a receptor or plugging a receptor, if that makes sense. That it's actually just activating the release of endorphins. So let's see here. I am curious about what you guys think the most lethal stimulant is. Methamphetamine? That's a good guess.
What's your definition of lethal?
Kills the most people. What's that?
So killing.
Yeah, killing, yeah.
Injected IV cocaine.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know that was like a thing.
Yeah, yeah. I do remember the numbers on that.
Yeah.
I believe the numbers are actually really low.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, the death rates on that are actually pretty low on that one. I could be wrong. Well, I think we'll get to that. I actually do not remember what I was thinking when I wrote this, but I know that I wrote myself a clue, so I'll remember by the end. But I remember there's actually something that would catch you off guard. So my memory will be jogged at some point at the very end. There's something that we're not thinking about.
Cigarettes.
Cigarettes? Right, well, yeah, so nicotine, right. Yeah, that's probably it.
It's a mild stimulant, so you don't really, it's a stimulant,
Mm-hmm.
but it's like,
Yeah,
I
stimulants.
guess you don't think of it as a stimulant because it's like, I feel like nicotine, I mean,
Yeah,
it doesn't feel like caffeine.
yeah.
It doesn't
Yes.
feel stimulating like as obviously, it just like feels weird.
I just remembered what it was too. And it's kind of like that, yes. So for example, can we say that nicotine is killing people if it's in the carrier of a cigarette,
Mhm.
and we're adding, say, the smoke inhalation?
We say it's the nicotine thing or cigarettes.
Yeah, so it's a lot of the externalities that come with the entire practice. So then we'd be lumping, say, like infections and HIV in with drug users that use needles, which I'm okay with thinking about that. But you see how we data process is going to affect numbers. Does that make sense? Not that we need to get that technical, but if we allow for including those externalities, then there's actually some surprising numbers in areas you wouldn't expect. Okay? And I won't tell you what I think until the end. Okay? I'm gonna let it simmer. But smoking should be obviously the first one on our minds. Should be. I just have a weird opinion, that's all. I have a weird, bizarre opinion. I'll make a pitch for it at the end. Okay? But smoking should be the first one on our mind, absolutely. For obvious reasons. Okay, so chapter 3 details in the past years, and then gives a whole bunch of statistics. Do you guys remember reading like the first couple paragraphs of the first, of chapter 3, where I just gave you just a bunch of statistics on smoking in the last year? Just like, I think it said 65 million people died in the last year from stimulants, which I was like, can that be right? How many people live in America? Like I was genuinely like, that can't be right. But I'm wondering what your guys' response to that was. Like, what is it like when we read these numbers? Like, seriously.
For me, it's like really sort of abstract.
150 million. I wouldn't know the difference. I can't wrap my head around that. It's like astronomers saying the universe is twice the size of what they thought it was. Like, well, I didn't understand the last number, okay? Yeah, we don't really get it. We can't really wrap our head around it. And so, I mean, it's still useful information, but not, it doesn't really have, like, you know, we have nothing to relate it to, do we? You know? And that's why I'm struggling with that. And I'm wondering, like, if in your group projects, that would be a good thing to incorporate, is something to find a way to make those numbers relatable. Like figure out, like, for example, what percentage, how many people are you likely to meet in your life who will die from stimulants? Do you see what I'm saying? Like, just some ideas, because you guys are going to do your groups, your projects or your individual projects on all kinds of things. You know, and whatever it is, you can apply these principles. These books, just like, okay, who cares? 65 million people, I don't know what that means. Can't relate to that number. That's a who knows number. I feel like I'm talking about the national debt. I don't understand that number. Like, you know, it means nothing to me. So just some ideas. And also what's really weird is I did a presentation in one of my classes a long time ago. I've been in school my entire life. I've lost count, you know, but I was taking a class on addictions a long time ago, and I did a class on smoking. I did a class on how the interventions that we have made over smoking over the last 60 years have done a fantastic job actually curbing it, to actually show that there was something like, and I looked really hard to try to find this lecture so you could actually watch like a young version of me presenting for like 12 minutes. It was going to be hilarious. But there was actually something like, for every American over the age of 18, there was, I think it was like 12 cigarettes consumed per day. And now today, fast forward, it's like, there's like 1 cigarette consumed per like 7 people. So like the numbers got like back, you know, reversed almost quite a bit. Like we backtracked so far, so fast. It was just, it was insane how much we changed them and how much people used to smoke. It was crazy. It was absolutely insane. And so those numbers were worse. That's the reality. Like those numbers, the ones that you're supposed to be shocked by, that we don't really know how to relate to, they used to be much worse. And it's like, okay, so what if they used to be twice as high? Nah, I don't know how to relate to it. So they're half of what they were. We're not reading them being thrilled yet. You know, we don't know to do that. We can't make sense of it. So that's the challenge, I think, with your groups, is like figure out how to make it, make sense of it, and figure out how to make it practical. If that makes sense. So just a challenge. So yeah, the normal energy process versus the stimulants. You know, we have like, I'd love to see, you know, people in their own, you know, groups or their own projects, like maybe bring in some of their own scope of practice with talking about maybe natural circadian rhythms and how the drugs might play into that. You can bring in whatever scope of practice you already have. You know, for stimulants, you know, it's interesting, you know, there's a crash and withdrawal model, and we're going to come back to this and reference this a few times, but you're spending energy that you don't have, or spending energy that you have to pay back. And yeah, it's not a normal energy process. Yeah, it's kind of like someone who spends money on a credit card until the credit card maxes out, and then crash, and then they pay off the credit card, and then they start over, if that makes sense. And so when they get back on the credit card at some point, they do it again. And different stimulants have kind of different speeds, or there's a word I'm looking for, amplitudes maybe, to that crash and withdrawal model that progresses faster or slower. And we'll maybe you might have noticed that in the books. Did you notice any of them that had like a really, really fast crash and withdrawal model? I don't know if the book actually pointed it out.
Okay.
Which one? Cocaine. So you did notice. Good job. Yeah. Good job. Yeah. I read it and I didn't notice that the book actually covered it well enough because maybe it mentioned it, but in reality, maybe it didn't cover it well enough like I felt. And there's definitely going to be some slides on here, but cocaine is so much more complicated than the book made it in terms of the way that people relate to it because of the quash and withdraw model is so aggressive. We'll get there. It makes you think about the drug differently than you would meth. So we'll get there. But anyways, physical effects, constricted blood vessels, cardiac consequences, orthopedic consequences, vascular disease, neurodegenerative or neurological consequences, weight loss, forced release of endorphins cause the body to think that its dietary or liquid needs are met. So the person typically suffers from malnutrition. That's actually what they get is malnutrition from just not knowing when they're hungry and not knowing when they're thirsty. I think I'm going to go over these, even though I think this is actually going to be covered a little bit later in the slides, but in fear that I didn't include it, I was an orthopedic medic at Walter Reed. And then before that, so I did the life flights. So all the soldiers that got blown up got flown to me, and I would patch them up. Before that, I was at Fort Bliss on the Texas-Mexican border, where they would do they would do the training for the airborne infantry training. And everyone's all stressed out because they're training for special forces and jumping out of planes and stuff. They would get injuries from falling. So fall on outstretched hand, that's a Fuchs fracture. Do you know much about that?
Yeah.
Fuchs, so that's where you fall and you break your scaphoid, right? Does anyone know what the variable with the scaphoid is? The scaphoid, the weird thing. The scaphoid is a weird bone. It's got one scaphoid. Yeah, sorry, scaphoid. Probably how they say it in the military because everyone's southern down there or something. But do you know what the weird thing about it is?
The blood supply.
You got it. Yeah.
Only like half of it
Yes.
actually gets blood supply.
The blood supply literally doubles back and comes from the wrong direction. And so the vascular access is like from up here and then down. And it's small vesicles, these small little arterioles going into it. And nicotine especially is known for constricting the smaller arterioles. More than like other forms of stimulants that have like larger vessels get shrunk. Nicotine does a lot of peripheral vessel shrinkage. That's a technical term right there. But the little tiny vesicles get actual shrunken down with nicotine more than others. So if you're a smoker and you fall on outstretched hand and you break that bone, you do not get enough blood supply to heal it, period. You can stop smoking the day you break it and it will heal. But if you don't stop smoking, it will not heal. You will be crippled, okay? I saw an average of 3 Fuchs fractures a day that were smokers for 3 months while I was over there. 5 days a week. I imagine it was probably 100 people. I don't know, maybe 200 or something. Can you guess how many of them said that they were willing to quit smoking?
None.
I think 2. Like basically none. I mean, I hit them as hard as I could, and we had other doctors talk to them. We basically said, you will be crippled unless you quit smoking today. Like, you're telling a 19-year-old boy
In the
military,
where all of them smoke.
yeah, you're going to be crippled if you don't quit smoking today. And he goes, damn it, I'm going to be crippled. It's rough. And the ones that said that they were going to quit, That's another story. I don't know if any of you have ever smoked, but I've known a lot of clients that tried to quit smoking. You know, they don't usually succeed. So my guess is none of them succeeded. That's unfortunate. So, yeah, it's a bummer. I do kind of wonder, like so many of them were smokers, I do also in my own mind wonder if they are more likely to break it. Does that make sense? Just because it gets less blood supply, what does that mean? Does the bone become brittle? It's just a guess. I could be wrong. I mean, that's me speculating. We know very little about orthopedics, to be fair. I actually invented a technique in the military that I heard someone using in Oregon recently. I just got so excited. Yeah, it was a traction-based approach for working with pediatric duck-fitted kids. Oh, so cool. Someone was using it in Portland. It was so exciting. So yeah, we'll get to that a little bit more later. This is specifically about cocaine. We'll get more to it, but nicotine can do this too because I have absolutely seen this orthopedically in cocaine. When you use stimulants, they constrict and reduce the amount of flexibility in the dilation and constriction of your arteries, okay? The blood vessels don't open and close as much. Because they don't open and close as much, there's more opportunity for calcium to build up. These are x-rays. See the problem? I've seen these, and it was not cocaine. It was smoking. These are cocaine images, but I've seen this with smokers. I remember looking at a doctor going, what the hell is that? And he said, oh, those are his veins. Why are we seeing his veins on an x-ray? Veins are not supposed to be hard like a rock. And he goes, oh, well, he's got calcium in his veins. And it was like, aren't they supposed to be able to dilate? And he goes, yeah, that's preferred. That's what he said. And then I said, does he have some sort of vascular disease? And this is what he said, I kid you not. He said, not yet. Not yet? Think about that for a second. Because you guys are going to become naturopathic doctors. This isn't a disease yet. That's not a disease. It's not a problem. There's no symptoms. Like yeah, you can do some. It's not okay, guys. It's not okay. But like this is not okay. Like see, this is it was I knew right then and there. It was just like that is not a good answer. That is not a good answer. Actually, his veins should not light up like bones. Yeah. So it's kind of scary. And that's a heart. Again, more indicative of cocaine. But when your heart starts filling up with calcium, it's kind of a problem. So all these things I've seen firsthand. So emotional effects of stimulants: increased confidence, focus, attention. It can induce euphoria. High doses, it can cause paranoia and psychosis.
I wanted to ask about that.
Yeah.
I know there's something specifically about dopamine that causes the paranoia because something about I wrote it down somewhere. Yeah. Something related to like the fear response, and that's what like caused the paranoia.
Yeah.
But what actually causes the psychosis, or like what is like the?
Can I say I don't know, but I'm willing to go find out and get back to you next week?
Yeah.
Partially because I was.
It is not an answer.
Well, if that is the answer we currently have, that's what I'll come up with. But I mean, the brain is a huge place, and it's not one person's scope of practice. Like it's kind of like saying I have a brain and I would like to understand the brain. Well, like this box does not fit in an equally sized box. They don't fit in each other. You know, it's kind of a philosopher's explanation. And so we kind of run into that a lot, where it's like I have a hard time really containing all of this. So I go and chicken peck kind of for when I need it a little bit. And over a career, like 10 years into studying the brain now, there are moments, especially when I can prepare for a nice lecture, that especially if it's like a 101 lecture on neuroanatomy, I look like I know it all. I do. but I do think there's a straight answer to that. I do think there's a straight answer to what causes the paranoia.
Oh, yeah, so dopamine can overstimulate the brain's right center, causing paranoia. That was the paranoia part.
Yeah, that's interesting, but it's not enough for me. I want to go a little deep in that. So do you mind if I?
Yeah.
Well, and it doesn't mean that dopamine doesn't necessarily get associated as anxiety, because dopamine isn't absent in the fight or flight system. Like, that's actually complicated. We should take a break at some point and talk about how emotions are constructed, because that's really complicated and beautiful. Did we talk about that at all last week, or did we talk about the researcher who went on the dating app at all? No, we didn't cover that? Okay. So first of all, dopamine isn't like the feel-good hormone. It's not that simple. Dopamine is involved in stress. Dopamine is involved in your fight or flight system. There is a lot of dopamine involved in trauma, okay? That's the reality. So it's not like this miracle ingredient that's just a good thing. It's way more complicated than that. And there is things like balance, like, well, you add cortisol to this equation and it tends to look differently, right? But what if it's a roller coaster? Can you have dopamine and cortisol and it not be traumatic? Be like, yes. But then there's also, like, you see how we can confuse it a lot. We can still find a model that we can break, where it's like, it actually takes quite a bit of refining to try to get a straight answer as to what kind of chemical balance actually is trauma and what isn't. And the answer is that there's actually a variable of association and perception. That emotions and perception are actually very constructed. They're not a circuit in your brain. You don't have a happiness circuit. You don't have a sad circuit. You don't have, you don't have emotion circuits. It's not that simple. You do have sensation circuits, and sensation circuits get used in all kinds of different ways and all kinds of different prompts. And they can, when they come up in certain predictable situations, you read them and follow up with beliefs about what that means, and you believe that's an emotion. I'll give an example from an actual research from How We Can Make Emotions by Melody Beattie, I believe. Yeah, I think that's who it is. She's an emotional researcher who went dating on a dating app. First half of the date, she thought this guy was really, really boring. She started to notice about halfway through the date that she had this little flutter in her stomach. And all of a sudden she was like, oh, maybe he's a little interesting. The more he talked, the more she was kind of into what he said, and she started finding him a little more interesting, and she thought there was some chemistry here, and so she asked him more probing questions, and she chose to be a little more vulnerable, and and then at the end of the night he said, would you like to go out with me again? And she said, yeah, I think I'd really like that. And then she went home and she threw up for 3 days because she had the flu. So
that's why they tell people to go on with the doctors.
Yeah.
Because you're down.
Yeah. Because you get the endorphins. So anyways, she went back on a second date with the guy, and he was boring the whole time. Okay, there's nothing there. But she was like, whoa, like, I got this sensation, and I just like ran with it, and my perceptual system just ran with it, and it totally derailed what I thought I knew about him. Totally derailed my emotional system. Like, I had constructed this whole belief and fantasy about him, and I constructed this attachment to him, and even carried this relationship for a half hour that wasn't meant to be. And it's a very good book where she actually talks about intercultural research, and she talks about studying the brain, and and basically coming to the conclusion that we have sensations, but there's a semantic barrier between our sensations and what we label those as. And those are kind of that semantic barrier is highly distorted based on our development and on our childhood experiences. So for example, here's a crazy example, a real example. We do a lot of brain maps in my clinic. If I do a brain map of somebody who is like a big CEO of a $100 million company, I am likely to find a map that looks very similar to somebody who has agoraphobia. Someone who has so much anxiety they can't leave their house. So why does this person have the same brain map as somebody who is so much anxiety that they can't leave their house? They don't present as anxiety. They don't really complain with anxiety. What's going on here? What's the difference? Any hunch?
The outer demeanor is not expressed in the brain.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Facial expressions are not mappable.
Mm-hmm. Yep, the facial expressions, maybe they're not mappable. Yep. Do you think that they're having different emotions? That's a trick question, I know.
No, emotions are mappable.
Yeah.
So,
Emotions are not necessarily mappable. That's the tricky
it's
part.
more like fear.
Yeah.
It's not
Well,
about the.
fear is,
It's not about
yeah.
the expression of the emotions.
Yeah.
Those are not mappable.
Right.
But the parts of the brain
Right.
that reflect those emotions are
Right.
mappable.
Right. Well, there's certain parts, there's certain like emotions are like for example, PTSD shows in the brain, and fear kind of shows in the brain. Anxiety is too vague of a term. Okay, let me give an example. Somebody is, say, the doorbell rings. One of these people feels this like pressure in their chest. Okay, it's a sensation. And one of them gets up and rushes to the door. Okay, or they open the mailbox and they see a letter and they have this pressure in their chest. They reach in there and grab it. The other person retreats. Is it possible it's the same sensation? Is it possible that they have different associations to the same sensation?
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. So, but then when is it anxiety and when it's not? That's the tricky part, because it's not obvious when it's anxiety and it's not. Fear, yes, you're right. But anxiety and fear can get conflated. They're maybe not the same thing, because we actually hard to get our terms right. Because fear might actually have its place in the brain. You might be right about that. Just like there's actually a little bit of a fair argument that happiness might, in a small, very, very well-defined way, happiness might actually have a certain circuit in the brain, and fear may have a circuit in the brain, but everything else is actually kind of cannon fodder. It's not actually easy to say there's a circuit for it, to be blunt. It's actually, there's very thin things that you can say belong there, and everything else is kind of soup, spaghetti. and it's a lot of sensory association based on developmental experiences. And we haven't gotten to this yet. I think we're not even going to cover it till like week 5, which bums me out. But do you guys know much about ACE scores?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. So what do you think between the guy who every time he feels pressure in his chest or a sensation in his chest, he jumps up and he moves, versus the one that retreats? You know, you think there might be a difference in ACE scores?
There could, but I feel like there's sometimes like the driven type
Yeah,
and the retreating type.
I would agree.
Both have trauma, and those things can both be, maybe not, I don't know, maybe different types of trauma or something, but like
Yeah.
both of those things can be kind of compensatory mechanisms for
Mhm.
stuff that happened in the
Mhm.
past.
yeah, and I also believe in something called what's the word for it? Post-traumatic growth.
Mhm.
So like post-traumatic growth would be someone who has a high ACE score,
Mhm.
but shows high amounts of resilience. Maybe because they've overcome that trauma. Is that possible? Like
Yeah.
like an ACE score isn't actually going to explain everything.
Mhm.
Like if you've overcome that, like does that make sense? I mean, there's a
It
good.
can still be an anxious state. I guess guess in my mind, I just like really driven people, like often seem like really
Yeah.
anxious people.
Yeah.
And like, it's just a different type of anxiety than the type that keeps you in the house.
Yeah.
You know, that's a different.
Well, the brain map, between the CEO
Yeah.
and the agoraphobic patient, that's actually a real study, and those are actually real parallel studies,
Yeah.
and there's real papers and books on that. So that's actually those two actually are compared a lot in research, and you see those together. So I didn't make that up. So those come up together, which is creepy, because it's like, oh, ooh, yeah, they do look the same when you look at their maps. It's like this one looks like an anxious brain, this one looks like an anxious brain, but this guy doesn't look anxious. He looks like he's just like pushing all the time, and this person's retreating all the time. Maybe they have the same amount of movement, but different directions.
Yeah.
You know. So I mean, that's maybe something to think about. You know.
Yeah.
That we could maybe mellow them both out, and that might be not a terrible idea if this person's approaching retirement. You know what I mean? Or if this person has an imbalanced life, which is true too. Sorry, we're way off track. Go ahead.
To backtrack.
Yeah, go ahead. Please, go ahead.
Can you just remind me of brain mapping? Is
Yeah.
it a PET scan, an fMRI, or what is it?
So, that's a really good question. The one, I believe that we are talking about a QEEG brain map in these cases.
QEEG?
Yeah, QEEG. So it's electroencephalography, qualitative electroencephalography map, which is actually something that we can play around with here, because I actually have that. I just fixed the Lavalorelli projector yesterday, so we can actually do a 3D version of it and actually like tear it apart and look at different parts of the brain. So yeah, it's a long story, but it's new fancy stuff. Yeah.
And what you're actually seeing is like nerve conduction? Or like
You're actually
what?
seeing the electrical signals in the brain.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're actually seeing all the electrical signals in the brain. So you can break them down by frequency and amplitude and phase and lag, harmonics, all kinds of stuff. Way more information than you'd want. Yeah, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. It's just a lot of information though. I mean, there's a reason why we like things like an MRI. There's limited data. Like, there's something to be said about having a limited amount of data. With a QEEG, it's just an obscene amount of data. It's obscene amount of data. It's almost too much data, and we don't necessarily like having that much data. When I do a brain map, before I even send out for what's called a discriminant, where I'm sending it out to a scientist or researcher to further break it down for a specific diagnosis, I have 800 pages before I even send it out for a diagnosis. So that's a lot of data. So, and not everybody gets that much data. I just happen to have the most thorough approach with the most thorough system. But yeah, it's just, again, I will let you guys play with that before the end of this course, because you guys can actually look at, we'll talk about all the different structures that are involved in addiction, and just let you see what they look like. And I don't know, maybe we'll bring like cake in and see if we can get something to light up when you look at it. I don't know, just for fun. So I'm gonna need to write down for myself. You gave me some homework.
The mechanism for psychosis.
That's right. I want to get back on track. Mechanism for psychosis.
Isn't that often just sleep deprivation or related to sleep deprivation?
I've read that, yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think maybe there would be a type that's like independent of sleep deprivation, like how you said, different drug costs, but like there are people who can cannabis once and then.
Right. Well, and they have a natural instability. They have a natural instability that they actually, there was something organically vulnerable in the nervous system. So there was a lot of things that could have tipped them off the edge, to be fair. But it is still, yeah, I mean, stimulants do that too. We actually should cover that before the end of the class. Stimulants will do that to a lot of people. Like if I have a friend of mine who I met at a conference called Isonar, and he invented a software that would look for epilepsy that you couldn't see with the naked eye. So essentially like spike and slow waveform. He would look for that with AI software. So if you couldn't naturally see it, you could still just let the software look over it. It would just kind of give you a thumbs up. Yeah, there's spike and slow wave behavior in the EEG, in the brain waves. You might want to consider an anticonvulsant, or it would point it out to you and like help you out. Look right here, you missed it. That way we wouldn't, because it's a real problem when you have a kid with, you know, you think they have seizures, but you can't see them, you know, or you can't prove it. I have those kinds of issues all the time, you know, with my clients for some reason. I don't know if that's normal. And there's also problems with when certain types of cells, I think it's the pyramidal cells, they're lined up and they're pointed straight towards the sensor, then you have a really, really hard time seeing that stuff because it actually just masks it in the sensor. You can hide it from the particular sensors that you're trying to identify with. So it can be hard to see that sometimes in rare cases. So we made this AI software and it was able to catch in a study all the kids that actually had seizures, even when they weren't having seizures. So it was able to say, yes, they have seizures. But then it had false positive on 20%. Oh, it had false positive on a number of different cases. And they were really frustrated that it kept having these false positives. But the more he looked into it, the more he started getting suspicious because it was like, they had a high tendency to have migraines. They had a high tendency to have instabilities in the nervous system, like asthma. They had a high tendency to have autoimmune issues. They had a high tendency to have ADHD. And specifically, he saw this and thought this was fascinating. ADHD, but also feel worse from meds. And it was like, huh. So they ended up doing some weird research, I believe, later that ended up being big, where they found out that a certain percentage of ADHD is linked to very low spectrum epilepsy instead of an organic ADHD. And I believe he's connected to that study in some way, which is very, very powerful. Like, but you know what happens if you have epilepsy and you're 7 and you're just, you know, your attention's not good because these little blips, these little, you know, engine stalls periodically. People think that you're not focusing well and they put you on a stimulant. What's going to happen? You can have active seizures.
Yeah.
And I know this from personal experience because they don't go to their doctor, they come to my clinic. Sometimes you take them off those meds and those seizures don't go away. Pandora's box is open. That sucks, okay? So we do things called neurofeedback to get Pandora's box closed, put it back. Now, that instability is like a real thing. You want to stay far, far, far away from stimulants after that if you can. You now know there's an organic weakness for seizures in this nervous system. And I think that in our theory of neurofeedback, we take a whole bunch of things like psychosis and migraines and asthma and autoimmune. We just classify them as basically instabilities. And we see that that seems complementary across lots of different fields because basically the left and right hemisphere are not mediating the central nervous system well. And the treatments that we do tend to be about left and right activation, which tend to bring closure to this whole classification of issues. I don't know if that's something that, like we tend to use anticonvulsants for a lot of these things for some reason. Like a lot of them are like, oh, a lot of them seem to work for a lot of these. But anyways, that's me going into my specialization. I don't want to do that for you guys, but it is, sorry, I'm way off topic. I'm trying to get back. But yeah, we're talking about stimulants. We're talking about ADHD. Talking about stimulants and instabilities they don't go well together. They just don't go well together. So you got to be careful. If you take enough stimulants, you get instabilities. Anybody can if you take a high enough amount. You know, I always think of the analogy in the brain for a seizure is kind of like, imagine that your brain is kind of like a microphone and amplifier on a stage. You turn the volume up high enough, the amplifier will start sending enough volume to get picked up by the microphone, and then you'll get a feedback loop, and you'll get this crazy loud ringing, right? And like on some level, like that's kind of what happens, I think, in a seizure, or that's how we've been described it as happening in a seizure. And if you take enough stimulants, you crank the volume high enough, eventually you can get seizures. And some people have a really, really high resilience to that, but you'll see in the back of your book, in the back of this chapter, I think it goes over what percentage of ER visits result in active seizures from stimulants. And I think maybe we'll get to that before the end of the class. We're skipping ahead though. So, all right, we probably should keep going because we're skipping way too ahead. Tolerance and addiction liability. Read together and consider the metronome synchronization. So 3.6. Does anybody have their book? Hold on, just get mine. I'm trying to remember what I was thinking here. 3.6. I must have wrote down the wrong thing. Tolerance and liability. I must have wrote down the wrong one, guys. See if anybody can find tolerance and liability. I know it's like on the left page.
Yeah, it does say 3.6.
Oh, it is?
There's 3.6. Oh, I was reading it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. 3.6.
3.6.
That's where it is.
I don't understand this book at all because
Yeah.
we ran into this. We ran into this last week, didn't we?
Yeah.
Where it was like we had. Yeah. Oh, you're right. 3.6 repeats itself. Oh, I get it. I'm understanding this
Is it
because.
like a figure 3.6?
No. If you go into 3.6 and something, then you're way too far.
Yeah.
And you have to backtrack a lot. So if you're at 3.11, 3.11 is actually later than 3.6.
Okay.
So I don't actually understand why this book is laid out this way. That's what we were running into earlier.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is not cool. All right. So I just wanted to read this really quickly, and I wanted you guys to keep in mind the analogy of the metronome synchronizing and how the brain is kind of this self-regulating system. And when we put drugs in it, it continues to self-regulate. But it self-regulates relative to the drugs. So think about this in terms of this paragraph. The continued use of a strong stimulant causes a decrease in the number of serotonin and dopamine receptor sites in the nucleus accumbens, which is the part of the brain specifically for pleasure, by the way, and other areas of the primitive brain. This is known as a down-regulation, and it causes the brain to crave even more of the drug to continue to overstimulate a small number of remaining receptors. The tolerance can grow to a very high level, and although the physical dependence of extended cocaine and methamphetamine use is not quite as severe as that of heroin, the psychological dependence is just as powerful and causes intense cravings during a crash and the subsequent withdrawal. The increase in physical dependence leads to developing an addiction. So what do you guys think in terms of like, this is complicated. I mean, do you guys understand what's going on with those receptor sites?
Yeah, they put it down.
Yeah.
Regulating, so then like the endogenous. I guess maybe if like the endogenous level of neurotransmitter is like not going to create enough of the signal because it's not as many receptors, so it creates craving for.
Yeah. When you stimulate like that pleasure button, basically it's like, oh, we're getting a lot of pleasure, so we start taking down the pleasure circuits just automatically. Okay, so we end up with very few pleasure circuits in the brain, and the ones we have are very, very demanding. Like, think about that for a second. And that happens pretty quickly. Like, the homeostasis is shot. And that's like, there's the mechanical thing going on here. And it's automatic and it's inevitable. It's not something we can get ahead of or beat. That's and it's just physics. Like the metronomes, just physics. So anyways, I wanted to talk to you guys about cocaine. We knew this, I told you this was coming. Cocaine has a little bit of more of an externality. There's more of a dopaminergic push, or it's not dopaminergic push, it's a dopamine push, sorry. It's not dopaminergic, it is a dopamine push. It's basically a big giant, I forget the cocaine that hits the receptor block, the receptor site, does so, when it does so, it damages the receptor site. It's actually bigger than, it doesn't fit, okay? And so when it does so, the enzymes that are supposed to metabolize the neurotransmitters actually metabolize the receptor site. That sucks. Think about that for a second. It's too big, okay? We got it's supposed to, okay? USB drive supposed to go in here, right? Doesn't fit. Boom. Okay, opens it up. And then the enzymes that's supposed to clear up the little keys, we talked about that last week, keys, supposed to come in here and break those apart. It comes in here and starts taking apart the receptor. So it metabolizes and breaks down the receptor sites in addition to the neurotransmitters. So we actually lose the dopamine receptor sites because it damages them. And then it's a big dopamine push. And it does so more so than other stimulants, to the point where the crash is harder and the crash is inevitable. The crash is inevitable because you just flat out run out of dopamine. You just run out, which means that, and the book doesn't really cover this, but this is true. You use, if you are a severe cocaine user, there is something you need to know about if you work in addictions. If they're a severe cocaine user out there, they will use it every day until one day they get up, they use cocaine, and nothing happens. Nothing happens, okay? And then they go through withdrawals. What do you think? And that happens like after weeks, not months or years, like meth. Meth's more like think of in terms of like long periods of time, that kind of long crash. This is shorter. If you're an intense user, it's pretty short. It can be weeks. So what happens when the crash is weeks long? The psychology of it. Anyone guess?
The psychology of?
Like psychology of severe cocaine users, heavy cocaine users.
They get super depressed.
Desperate?
They do. They're desperate. Yeah, they're desperate. So they're not happy. There's no mechanism in their brain for being happy until those systems recover, which they do. They just have to be depressed for a while. There's nothing else you can do, right? I mean, maybe there's something, but I don't know what it is, okay? You just have to regrow new receptor sites. They can't even get high, okay? Not that I understand. That's how I understand is they can't get high. So, and they are going to be sober. They're only a few weeks into this, maybe a month or so or two into this, and they're sober now. So this is the crazy thing. And this is a weird thing I want you to consider. And no one talks about this, and I don't know why this is like a common thing to know. But like, do you think that they think they are an addict?
Wait, if they just started using cocaine 2
Yeah.
years ago, but then they used
Yeah.
cocaine and then this happened?
No, they don't.
Yeah.
Oh,
No, they don't.
They don't have enough time to.
Exactly. Nobody thinks they're an addict. Cocaine users, heavy cocaine users, never think they're addicts. And people who've worked in addictions for 10 years don't understand this sometimes. This is really, really important to get, guys. Heavy cocaine users need to be educated on this so they can see, like, your pattern of addiction is consistent with your drug choice. Like, well, I'm not addicted like my meth friend. Yeah, but you aren't on meth. You're on cocaine. But well, yeah, but I only use it for a couple weeks at a time. That's all you can use it for. That's it. That's it, man. There's no other choices for you. And you're like, well, I bet you got up one day and used it and it just didn't work. I'm like, hey, yeah, that happens. You got me. So, but that's really, really important. Like, you understand that they're not going to, it's not that they can't move forward, but like, that they need that dose of reality. Like, it's really important that we bring that dose of reality to them. That we have to help orient them to that pattern, and help orient them to that their own denial, that this is actually what this looks like for a cocaine addict. Does that make sense? To say, yeah, if this is the only pattern there is. Does that make sense? So, and so it's just useful to understand. And again, it's one of those things that I've worked in addictions for years and years. Some people never learn that. And it's just like, when you explain that to the addict, you're just like, whoa, you know, they find it really useful.
So they just felt like they were partying.
I was just partying for a few weeks.
Yeah.
Sometimes I just go partying for a few weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just blow all my money and go crazy and lose my job, and then I get down for a few weeks, and I get up my butt and I work for 5-6 weeks. I have kind of a period where I'm feeling okay, and I build up my cash reserves. And then I blow it all and I go party for a couple weeks, and then I crash for a few more weeks. And I just have this thing where it's like this 20-week cycle or something. I don't really know if it's 20 weeks, but I think it's something like that. It's been a while since I've been in actually working in addictions work, but it's something like that, like a 20-week cycle, you know. And they don't know it's a pattern. They just, because they don't have to face it like meth addicts are a little bit more. They're a little bit more faced with it, I would think. You know? That they kind of have this denial, like, well, I stopped using it periodically, so I don't think I'm an addict. Well, yeah, but that's just kind of the methodology. That's a mechanism of the drug, though. You stop using it as a kind of a method. It's kind of built into the drug. So, and again, your book didn't tell you that, so I was just kind of like, I wanted to see if we could piece together. So, let's see, long-term use, not viable with consistent users. The users orient themselves to a tolerable narrative. That's kind of an important thing to remember. They orient themselves to a tolerable narrative. That we all kind of do this, and addicts do this. That the story they're telling themselves, and some therapists will even use some of that language in working with them, like, well, what story are you telling yourselves about this drug? Or because it's just, you'll see some fantastic rationalizations, but it's also a little arrogant to assume that we're not doing that a little bit too, with even just maybe minute things. So, but we orient ourselves to tolerable narrative. But if you can get really good at sussing out what the narrative is in people's lives, and helping them see or accept that as a story in their lives that they could take responsibility for and change. Meth. Has anybody ever worked with meth or any experience with meth? I'm not asking a personal question, but anyone's always ready to. You're always welcome to share, but that wasn't a personal question.
Well, even if it's more like
Mm-hmm.
meth overdoses than opiate overdoses in Florida.
Yes. Yeah, we kind of were a little bit of the unofficial meth capital, weren't we? All right? Like for the 1990s?
I'm sure there's
Yeah. What's that?
I'm sure there's a lot of contenders for meth.
Maybe, yeah. I think maybe Eugene was or something like that. I don't know if the book mentioned the Northwest, didn't it? Yeah, it did. Yeah, it did mention this. Yeah, it did. It mentioned the Northwest. It was kind of like the 1990s, I think, where it had its biggest boom. And I mentioned a few of those details in here, and added a few, as well. But think about it in terms of like cocaine, which, if you didn't know, it comes from the cocoa plant. We get coffee from that, we get chocolate from that, and we get cocaine from that. Did you know that? It all comes from the same plant.
They're different.
Well, I might be wrong about the coffee while I'm thinking about that.
I think they're all grown in similar places, but
Are
they
they?
are different.
Let me look it up. Hold on, my brain's out. Someone get the internet quick. I'm missing with my thinking. Did we get the coffee from it? I don't think we get coffee from it. Our family? Maybe I'm wrong. Let's look
They
it up.
probably are related to one another.
Yeah.
I think they grow in similar climates, so they're
Uh-huh. Are they really? Okay, well, I stand corrected. I'm gonna have to look it up later. So now I got 2 homework assignments. Hold on. I think, I like having homework assignments, believe it or not. Hold on. Let's see, what is it for this? Oh, geez. So, yeah. Yeah, I think there's, I'm having a time, maybe I'm conflating or confusing it with something else, but there's something else that we use it for.
Coca-Cola.
Is that what it is? But that's not currently. Oh, they do. They still do.
That's what I read. That
They still do. You're
still
right.
use the coca leaves, but
Yeah.
they take the cocaine out.
They use it for the caffeine.
Maybe
Yeah.
for caffeine and just like for flavor and other.
That's right. That's what I'm forgetting. I'm sorry. It's not the it's not the coffee. It's the caffeine. I'm getting all confused in my head. Sorry. As I said, it's very tired. I got about 3 hours of sleep last week. My wife did not actually want me to come to class today. I could not do that to you guys. Okay. So she wanted me to stay home with her. We've had a pretty rotten week, unfortunately. So I want to run home and give her some support. So, but yeah, they knew there was something there. But yeah, thank you. I'll read a little bit more about that though, because I do want to read more about that still. Get that clear in my head. I feel like there's something else about that I'm not remembering, so I still want to read more about it. Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting plant, but it's not from here. That's actually what my point was. It's not from here. Whereas with meth, it costs half as much. It can be made here. It has a 4 to 6 hour psychoactive effect instead of 10 to 90 minutes via, instead of cocaine. It's basically cheaper, easier to get, more reliable. People can make it. There's just like, it's like, oh, well, it makes sense that poor populations would gravitate towards it. Does that make sense? It's just kind of like, well, yeah, that makes sense that this would become a thing. When you look at it in side by side compared to cocaine. So that's just what I wanted you to observe. That's all. Yep, and the addiction is far more obvious to the user. So the physical effects of meth are about 11.3 loss of limbic gray matter, the hippocampus, the cingulate gyrus, paralimbic cortex, areas associated with cravings, emotions, mood, and memory. I want you to think about this and take it further. We discussed the hippocampus before. Do you remember what it was and why I might be bringing that up now? Day one, what did I bring the hippocampus about? Maybe it might have been during the recorded class.
It's poorly connected to the limbic hyperarousal.
When we have PTSD.
Cortisol inhibits memory integration.
Yes. So you're thinking about the dynamic of PTSD. Cortisol inhibits hippocampal cortical integration.
Yeah.
And it becomes hyper-aroused. The whole limbic system becomes hyper-aroused. I'm speculating here. I'm purely speculating here. But I saw this and go, that's interesting. I wonder if there's some sort of reason. I wonder if there's a reason why. I wonder if people with PTSD gravitate towards meth for a reason. It seems to have a negative adverse effect on systems related to PTSD. Do people with PTSD disproportionately use meth? I wonder. I'm just curious. I don't know. But it's an area that could be explored, in your own personal papers, if that's something that you are inclined to study or explore. That could be something that a couple searches on the library might bring out some interesting results. I have a very, very hard time believing that any addict doesn't have trauma, right? Maybe all addicts have some trauma. There is an argument that I heard when I was really, really young that, if you're exposed to the chemical long enough, you'll eventually become an addict. There's like this long curve. You have these genetics and you have all these factors and you have your ACE scores. And basically it just makes this, this like addiction curve, kind of this bell curve basically, or not this bell curve, but this absolute power curve is what it is. Makes this absolute power curve basically accelerate faster. That if you don't have any vulnerabilities, then it's like slow and then it doesn't crank up for a long time. And I just don't think that the rat park suggests that. I think that's an old model. I think rat park seems to shake that model loose. Does that make sense? I think all those models that I was taught when I was in your position, or when I was studying, you know, to become a drug and alcohol counselor, I think that's what they used to think. I'm just not confident on that anymore after studying the rat park. So just something to remind you of. Keep thinking about rat park. Don't forget about rat park. It literally seems to derail a lot of the classic thinking on addictions. Like you'll hear it a lot of addiction stuff. If you go into an addictions internship, or if you go into addictions job, you'll see where rat park seems to, it doesn't really fit anymore. Like, you know, just like this. So,
Also,
okay.
like, people have preferences.
Mm-hmm.
Or like some people get addicted to something, some people get addicted to other things. And so it's not just about like access to a particular substance.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's actually, yeah, I totally agree. Actually, 100% agree. And I think that there's actually some organic vulnerability as to why you have a particular preference. I'm actually very fascinated with the SPECT scans, because the SPECT scans could kind of predict what you would prefer. You know, because you have hyperarousal in the brain, which would want you to want downers, or you have underarousal in the brain, which would make you want uppers. And it would just be like, you could kind of predict what self-medication would bring them closer, and you know, to a normal. If you saw PTSD too, PTSD is really fascinating because Eamon's done a pretty good job of convincing the community that at least PTSD looks like this in a SPECT scan. So I mean, I don't think that one has gotten as much criticism as some of his other claims, but that one's actually, I think, been pretty well received. If there's this diamond pattern in the brain of overarousal in the limbic areas, that if you see that, you can bet they have PTSD. So, and we can see that in the EEG as well. You know, I mean, as I said, I sent my brain map off to a scientist last week, and they told me that I have PTSD. Now, I've been to a lot of therapy. Okay, I've done a lot of EMDR, and I don't have flashbacks anymore. I don't have nightmares anymore. I'm probably one of the coolest people you ever met. I get twitchy when I get like I get adrenalized when I get like, I don't know, like, what do you call it? Like a subpoena. But I mean, I think a lot of people do. So you know what I mean? You know, or if I get summoned or something like that, you know, I get twitchy, you know. But I don't know. I guess maybe there's still some lingering evidence that it's there, or maybe that there's still something to work on. So I'm not avoidant towards therapy. But you know, I was in the military, and I was the frontline medical receiver. I have good reason to have PTSD. So I'm sorry, what were we? We're getting back on track, guys. What were we talking about? Brain waves. Oh, brain balances. Yeah. So for example, you can look at a SPECT scan. You can kind of predict, you know, like certain types of things will bring those regions of the brain down. And so Eamon's got his own little equations, his own opinions about all that don't actually have perfect congruence with Western medicine. I don't think that he's following anybody else's thing. Maybe they'll all kind of meet together someday, I don't know. And I don't believe he's gonna be right. Like, I don't sit squarely on his camp. I'm like, he's interesting, you know, we'll see what he does. Okay, so anyways, physical effects of meth. There's blood toxicity levels. That's a big variable with meth. It's not necessarily as much worth noting in other things, though I suspect nicotine, you know, smoking could still be an interesting thing to explore, but blood toxicity levels are exceptionally high in meth. And because of that, you get aneurysms. So you basically have tissue breakdown, okay? That particularly affects the mouth. So they get this thing called meth mouth, where they just like lose their teeth, they have gum disease, they get skin damage, and that skin damage is exacerbated by compulsive behavior. I could not tell you what I've seen without keeping you up tonight, okay? It is bad. They will do some massive damage to themselves, and it's a mix between vascular disease and compulsive behavior. and sleeplessness. Because then they're never not compulsively irritating themselves, picking themselves, whatever it is they're doing. Does that make sense? They're on it 24/7. And then of course, heart damage, because your heart is, part of your vascular system doesn't respond too great to toxicity. So this is one of those things that, like, when you read this part of the book, I hope you guys had a similar reaction to me, like this kind of underwhelmed frustration with the book and its lack of maybe coverage of meth babies. Do you guys remember reading this section at all? No, it's just like, oh, they're irritable babies, and here's all these things, and 33% of them have disabilities. And it's like, does that just mean that like 67% of them are okay? Like, I mean, maybe we're supposed to read between the lines because we can kind of do that, but these kids are severely damaged kids. All of them are. Okay, I don't care if they turn out normal. A normal kid would have been a brilliant, brilliant, brilliant kid. Okay, if he ended up normal and he was on meth as a baby, he would have been something amazing. Like you took him down a notch. I don't know where he was gonna be, but you know what I'm trying to say? So I don't know that the book did that justice, where like maybe we don't want to say if there's no evidence of damage, there still is. But that's what I felt was missing. Because I think it's worth knowing, like, you've done a pretty big insult to a child in a very critical developmental stage for a pretty critical length of time. And maybe the human spirit can overcome that. Maybe in your education, you'll conclude that an infant can overcome that. I have such a hard time imagining that. That seems, in my experiences of working with these kids growing up is rough. Like, I have a lot of pro bono slots. About 20% of my practice is free for kids that are in the foster system and adopted kids. And I do that because I like to have a lot of purpose and meaning in my own life. And it's a lot of kids like this. And I hesitate to launch into description without your consent to how that might affect your evening. Does that make sense? Like, like their behaviors and their issues are pretty bad. And even if they get them from birth, it's like, you can't imagine how damaged they act out and become. And we
give a general description of the behaviors?
So I work a lot with parents that can get these kids like 5 days old, from birth. Like it's like we have as much nurture on board as is humanly possible. And they're still rubbing their feces all over the walls as a defiance move, like as toddlers. And it's a defiance thing. Screaming for hours on end, completely unsuitable. That's the irritable. Like that is not a good enough description. Okay, until you're holding a child that can scream for 6 hours, that is not a good description. Irritable is not good enough. Like, this is a supernatural, like, distress. They scream themselves to sleep, and they have rages, like oppositional defiance, intermittent explosive disorder, with seemingly no developmental exposure because they're kind of gotten from birth. They seem to have dysregulated deviant behavior, like touching the family pets inappropriately, trying to hurt the pets. Just things like that. It's in like these kids don't have access to their birth parents. They were adopted quickly. They were taken, and the only thing we have is the DNA on board and the chemicals they were exposed to in utero. And there was a lot of like campaigns that ended maybe 10 or 20 years ago. I don't know how long it's been, but there was a lot of like, if you adopt these kids before the age of 5, tabula rasa, baby. It's a blank slate, you know, because the hippocampus doesn't really do a great job at encoding memory, so you can't remember anything, so there's no developmental impact. And I don't know if they really believed that, or if it was just propaganda to get kids adopted. But I mean, you're talking about a whole nother ball game when you actually have sexual abuse. You know, much less just, you know, when you're dealing with a single univariable like a meth baby. But it's shocking how much that can still seemingly play out every symptom that you can imagine. Even when you're like, you know, is there an abuser? Like when did you adopt them again? Like, you know, like it's just like you'd think that they were in the foster system their entire life. Like, no, we adopted them from birth. You know, these are a lot of the same features their birth parents had. You'd expect from being raised from their birth parents, but they weren't. Never had access. But it's rough. It's really rough. You know, those drugs do a lot of damage to the frontal cortex, specifically executive function, impulse control, emotional, social regulation. Just hammers this part of the brain. There are very few things that affect the brain to the point where you can take a ruler and measure in millimeters how it's smaller. Meth will do that to a baby in utero. That's one of the few things that can do that to a baby's brain. Where there is a ruler, and I can actually physically measure the difference. Okay, with severe autism, I can measure the brain in different proportions by a couple millimeters, and that's huge. It's a huge deal. It's like 1 or 2 millimeters, the sensory motor strip shifts forward in autism, and that's only severe autism. And you can see this kind of plain as day in meth babies, that the frontal cortex shrinks. It's rough. It's really rough. And your book doesn't even go into that. It doesn't do it justice, in my opinion. So sorry.
So other stimulants wouldn't cause the same
I
result?
don't know. That's a fair question. I don't know, but I do know that you have a lot of issues with the toxicity, because we cannot predict the effect of the blood level toxicity. Because not only is the blood level toxicity going to go through the placenta barrier, it might just punch right through the placenta barrier, allowing lots and lots and lots of things through the placenta barrier that are typically not allowed through. Like we don't really understand that. You know what I mean? We don't understand any of that. Like there's so much about that that's not studied. So like it's a big who knows. So yeah, no idea, no clue. So yeah, depressing. But actually, you know, I'm gonna go back just 1 second. I have had families that have thrown their passions at these kids, like thrown everything they have at these kids. Because I do want to give some hope. Okay? You have to set emotional boundaries for yourself if you're a caretaker for this. Okay? You have to like know that you have to, at the end of the day, you've succeeded if they're a happier person because they knew you, and they're going to be happier because they knew you. We talked about that the first or second class, right? But you have to have some boundaries. It's not like they have to become a functional member of society. That can't be your boundary because you have no control over that. They have to be something more actually something less tangible, honestly, but it has to be something more realistic. But the reality is, even though I don't want you to hope for this, but the reality is that I've seen families throw everything they have at this. These kids usually go to like naturopaths and occupational therapy a couple times a week, and they usually go to neurofeedback, and they're doing nutritional therapy, and they're stripping out like red dye out of their diet, and they're doing all these things that seem, and I don't know why, but red dye really wrecks these kids. Like they really, I swear, I'm a third party just watching. Like they take them off red dye, they do really good. I know nothing about that. I'm just watching, okay? I have no clue what's going on. You know more about that than me. And they look like they're heading for jail. Half of them do get turned around. When we throw everything we have at it, half of them do get their life together. And I don't know why half of them do and why half of them don't. And I can't predict which ones will and which ones won't. I do know that it takes throwing everything we have at it, though. Does that make sense? So I just don't want people to give up or think there's no hope. I didn't want to leave that energy in the room, okay? Because I donate my time, so I obviously believe that this is worth doing. Like I donate 20% of my time. That's an enormous amount of time. It's huge, okay? And I do have a waiting list, so I can fill those with paying clients. I don't, okay? I have, yeah, I'm good on all that, okay. So anyways, all right. Why is there an ADHD slide on here? Oh yeah, stimulants. That's right. Sorry, that was a big transition right there. So yeah, ADHD stimulants. It's worth thinking about. But like, is it attention? Is it really an attention deficit or is it an attention different? What do you guys think? I'm curious.
I have ADHD, it feels like that.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Feels like yeah.
It feels
Yeah.
like I can't stay.
Yeah.
It's not enough.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel
Yeah. So if we were to get out, say, my fancy brain stuff, and we were to map your brain, we would find that you have twice as much theta in the top of your head that you do as beta. So there's 2 times as much as one frequency as there is another. Okay?
Okay.
That's kind of a classic organic model for ADHD. And theta is kind of a frequency that's related to kind of creativity or drowsiness, kind of some low conscious processing. And you know, when ADHD people have to focus, they get drowsy, right? Hi there. Do you relate to that when you're reading, you're drowsy?
yes.
Yeah, I relate to it too.
Yeah.
It's like, you know, so it's like a nice little like way of like indicating like my theta kind of spikes really quickly. It's really strong. And then beta, which we're low on, is a frequency in the brain that relates to alert readiness. So we're low on alert readiness, and we're high on something that makes us feel drowsy, but can be used for creativity. Does that make sense? People who are low on beta can also be subject to maybe more instabilities. Like we actually treat seizures by training up beta. That was done by we talked about that NASA and the cats, right? Training up beta, resolve the seizures in the cats. So it doesn't really matter whether you view it as a deficit or a difference. When you look at it in the EEG, it looks like a deficit. It actually does. But when you, what's that?
So that's validated.
Good. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Then there's other models which can get a little bit confusing and frustrating. Like when you look at hunter-gatherer tribes, it doesn't look like a deficit. But when you look at the brain, it does. The reason why is because the ADHD people tend to be hunters because they go and they run a lot more. And we found in the studies, I wonder if these are listed or not. Yeah, they are. So some of these are actually done by some friends of mine. So the Thompsons had an intern, they're kind of a sister clinic of ours. They had a PhD candidate who wrote a study on riding your bike 20 minutes a day. She did parent report, teacher report, a brain map, and a continuous performance test. So she did a bunch of assessments, and then she had some of these kids take Adderall, and then she had some of the kids take exercise. Riding their bike to school instead of taking the bus. The kids who rode their bike to school instead of taking the bus beat the kids who were prescribed Adderall in every single way. There's no area of study where they didn't outperform, which is interesting. Like, I don't know what that means. Meaning that the exercise, that bilateral stimulation or the endorphins or something, you're not sure exactly what it is, self-normalized the nervous system more than the stimulants. And the stimulants push endorphins, right? That's what they do, they push endorphins. So it's like, okay, this is an interesting idea, right? I don't know, what do you think about that?
Is it true that there's also like a depletion of stimulants on term, whereas exercise there's not?
Say again?
Is it true that like you would get depleted of endorphins after taking stimulants on term versus exercise?
Yeah, I like that. I was actually thinking that. I was wondering if someone was going to say it. Yeah, I don't know. I can only imagine that. I was just meeting with a close friend, the guy who was actually trying to get to be a speaker here, but he's busy tonight. We fixed his nervous system and then he went on Adderall, and now he's having to get off the Adderall because we fixed his nervous system. So the Adderall is now, one, I think there's two things going on. One, he's got too many depleted endorphins from taking it. And two, he doesn't need it. So he's actually getting over medication responses from it. So he's taking it, he's getting overstimulated, which is a good thing. So if you actually fix the ADHD, they no longer have too much theta and they have enough beta. When you take it, you feel bad. When you take it, you should feel good. If you take it and you feel bad, you're taking too much. Does that make sense? So did I answer your question? I'm sorry, maybe I misunderstood. Okay, okay. Yeah, but there's that crash and withdrawal model that you're talking about, right? We don't really have the crash and withdrawal with exercise, do we?
I'm also curious your opinion if you were to prescribe a medication to someone who doesn't need it, and they were to take it long term despite maybe having those like a negative response rate sort of in the beginning, do you think that their brain would respond to that stimulant and they would become like they would have ADHD?
That's a really, really good question. First of all, so I don't prescribe stimulants. I work very, very, very closely with doctors that do those, just so we're clear. Because I want to make sure there's real clear lines between like what I'm trying to coach you guys and what I'm absolutely not. Because I'm not going to get in trouble. I actually have insurance, by the way, as a teacher. Just because what I'm doing is really weird. Okay. So I'm trying to get on track with your question. You asked one more time. You asked.
If someone were to not have ADHD and
yes.
they start taking a stimulant and they're on it for a long time, like when they come off the stimulant, could they then have ADHD?
Not for ADHD, no. There are other things where you could say there are other things where that could happen, and I think maybe in the course of this class we'll point out some of those, but not for ADHD. There are things like ADHD where if you take the Adderall, you're actually going to like this, by the way. If you take the stimulant, it actually increases blood flow in the back of the frontal cortex, which is kind of like where my three fingers are here. Long-term increased hyperperfusion of blood flow here increases synaptic migration and increases vascularization. Think about this. In 83% of the population, the more you shove oxygen into a part of the body, the more it will grow veins. Okay, 17% are just aliens or something, okay? But most people grow veins if you throw more oxygen in there. So if you take Adderall, you get more blood flow here. If you get more blood flow here, you get more vascular access there over the course of a few years. If you get more vascular access there, you get more blood flow there. You can stop taking the meds someday and you keep some of the benefit. Adderall is one of the few drugs that you can actually take and keep some of the benefits. But if you're taking it and you don't need it, or if you're taking it and you're retaining some of the benefits, there's two things that can happen. One, you can take it and start running out of endorphins and crash, just like we talked about with the crash model. Or you can start, because you don't want to take Adderall consistently because you can get addicted to it. But if you're just taking it periodically for attention and you stop needing it because your nervous system is healing, and you take it and you are now taking too much, you will feel bad. You are now taking too much. You will have negative side effects. Okay, does that make sense? So you are taking too much, and you should be really cautious about over-medication. When I do neurofeedback on people, and we're fixing their ADHD, they get side effects from the treatment. So it's like we're having this thing where like they're doing treatment and they're feeling better, worse. That's when they have to get off their meds. They got to call their doctor.
So it's like being over the neurofeedback can induce like an overstimulated.
Because no, the meds are. The meds weren't before because the meds were bringing them up to normal, and now the meds are bringing them over normal. Yeah, does that make sense?
The meds need to be
yeah. So I just work closely with their doctor. And I developed that relationship at a time, and it's just, and these days, 98% of the doctors already know what I do, and most of them referred my clients to me, and there's just, everything works these days. Like 5-10 years ago, it was not that way. So, and 5-10 years ago, everybody was like, what are you doing to my client? So,
I imagine that you could see that on imaging or something, and then
yeah,
in
yeah.
addition to that,
You
was
should see it
there-
in like a PET scan or a SPECT scan or something like that. Yeah.
Then in addition to that, was there a study on like actual function?
Well, what do you mean by function? Function, define function.
Like the person's ability to focus once they were off the meds and had the increased exposure, was there an actual study
Yeah.
that showed that they were?
You know what? I wouldn't mind looking for it, but that's not something that I have read in a long time. I'm quoting something that I was taught a long time ago. But I don't mind looking for it because I don't mind having that study in my back pocket. That's an old thing. So I actually, like, now that I'm teaching, it's like I'm actually accruing these giant like files full of all my favorite research that I can actually, you know, hand them out when I need to, or put them in my slides. And there's just some that I haven't had a reason to look it up yet. So thank you. You want me to look up the study on?
What if I asked? Because I was on a stimulant for
Yeah.
a long time, and when I came off of it, it was very hard to concentrate
Yeah,
for a while.
yeah. How long were you on it?
Pardon?
How long were you on it?
Like 4 or 5 years.
Yeah.
Mostly on it sometimes.
Yeah, and I also don't believe that people are all the same. Like for example, if your experience is, you know, I feel like I took something and it went backwards on me, that my brain formed a different relationship with it. Like I told you that only like 83% of the population increased vascularization from increased oxygen exposure. Like, they're like, what are the other 17%? Are they aliens? Like, we don't even know. We've identified the DNA strands of the people, but we're like that doesn't make any sense. You know, do you understand? There's like tons of things about people that don't make sense. And you're like, if your experience is, well, mine doesn't fit that model. It's like, yeah, you might just be a little different, and there's so much room for that. I mean, tons of room for that. And there's like, don't try to fit, don't like there's all these things we think we know. Don't try to shove people into that. You know what I mean? We're not going to shove you into that model. You know, don't shove our patients into that. We try to see if they fit it, and if they don't, we try to think a little bit more above it, I think. And that's what I'm thinking, you know. And I'm speaking more from like someone who does, you know, brain training. I'm not speaking from a prescriber's position, and so, but I assume that the principles are going to be the same. So I'm just let you know. So let's see, perfusion. I'm pretty sure that I remember where I learned this. I learned this at the ISNR conference in 2011 or no, 2012. I just have to remember which lecture it was. I can track it down.
What conference was
The International Neurofeedback Research Conference. Yeah, that's where I learned it. I can remember where I can remember where I learned it, but I can't remember exactly what publication. I can try to track it down. So, what time is it exactly?
Yes, 5 minutes until.
What time are you guys done with this class?
In,
Oh, in an hour. Okay, good. I was gonna say, I feel like we're done in like 7 minutes or 3 minutes ago. That would scare me. There's too many slides. Yeah, please. Yeah, please.
So you said that the pattern in ADHD is
Yeah.
often 2 theta to 1 theta.
Correct.
So what is the ratio in people that do not have ADHD?
Less than, so lower
Is it like
than.
1 to 1, basically?
No, it's just
Less than 2 to 1.
it's just less than 2 to 1. Yeah. So if we see that cross that line, then we start to think this is more indicative of ADHD.
Okay, and
So-
then it's more like about the ratio than like how much theta or theta, right?
Well,
It could
yeah,
be,
yeah.
like,
You want to
less
take a
theta.
whole look, because like, for example, I could have somebody that has global theta at high amplitude and they have dementia, but that doesn't mean they have ADHD. So I mean, like, as long as you are looking at the whole picture, like, and you're not like as long as you're not ignoring something obvious. Yes, you know what I mean? Apart from all that stuff, because I just want you to know it's not that simple, but as long as you're not ignoring something huge, yes. and you can look up Joe Lubar did all the research on that, like way back in like the 60s and 70s. Joe Lubar is a fantastic guy. I've met him many, many times. Joe Lubar, yeah. Still alive. You could probably call him up and talk to him. You know, I've had lunch with him. He's a nice guy. So, yeah, and there's lots and lots and lots of research around theta-beta ratio for ADHD. It's very validating to know like there's something organic, foundational in your brain. Joe Lubar, I think it was like way back in like 1972 or something. He was just doing these case studies where he would blindly try to look at brain ratios of theta beta and just predict based on the theta beta ratio whether or not they had ADHD. And then he'd have 6 months of psychologists would try to predict these 6 months, these psychologists would have 6 months to say whether they had ADHD. And he had this obscenely high, something in the 90s, psychologists who said that they had ADHD or didn't have ADHD. He only looked at the brain waves, and the accuracy was just super high, one of the highest accuracy you'd expect for an assessment. And so it's pretty fantastic stuff. Very old research, very high percentage accuracy, and they've only gotten better at it with time. But there are a lot of things that when you look at the brain, when you're looking at brain waves, there's a lot of things that get immensely complicated. There are not a lot of things as simple as ADHD. ADHD is nice and simple. We like simple things in the brain with frequencies and brain waves. If you want to study that, that would be fun. If you want to look at like electrical signals in the brain and you drift from that, I guarantee you'll get overwhelmed quickly because it's a steep drop off. But this is actually a simple thing in the brain. It just doesn't stay that way for long. So, yeah. Okay, we talked about this. There's an example right there. Crack. What do we call it? Scaphoid? Scaphoid. Sorry, that was like 6 years ago or 5 years ago or something. I was an orthopedic medic. Yeah, crack. Yeah, nicotine. Significant public tension around nicotine. A lot of political strife between the general public or around regulators or with the big tobacco company. And I think there's maybe something in the news today, maybe worth mentioning in conjunction with this. Did anybody notice the breaking news today?
I didn't know today, but there's been all the news about the vaping related.
Oh yeah, what was that? I missed that one.
Oh, a lot of people have been having severe lung disease. I think that's a big name for it.
Oh man, yeah. I'm curious. At some point, if somebody has passion about that, I'd love to hear about that. If somebody writes a paper on that, I'm excited just because I don't know enough about that. So.
But and there's nothing. I don't think there's anything about that. This book is from 2014. This is all just started like this year. There's been all this hospitalization.
Yeah.
It was like the vitamin E.
Yeah. Do you think they just don't know how to do it yet, or do you think it's something they can fix, or do you think it's like foundationally problematic?
It seems like it was like really sketchy brand.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not regulated well. I know that. Yeah. There's that buttery, forget the compound in it that causes the popcorn lung. They did like an audit and found that it's in like 80% of the products that says that it's not in it. There's no regulation is what the problem is. Like I remember reading articles about it.
So in this book it said that FDA controls, maybe it's just tobacco, so that does the FDA not control like usage?
I think that they're not caught up controlling it because I think I could go back and look and find the articles that I read a little while ago. It basically said that when the auditors finally get around to checking, they basically find that all these companies have been lying. But like that's kind of what I read is
Should
that
they check before the products are released? Isn't that the point?
I would hope. Yeah, but what is that? They say it's called Murnol. So there's that popcorn lung derivative. I'm trying to remember that one But yeah, basically everybody likes the way that it feels. It makes it feel buttery. And nobody, it just feels like steam if you don't have it, basically. And so all the vape products want it in there, but everybody doesn't want it in their vape product. And so there's this high pressure to say it doesn't have it, but have it, apparently. That's what I'm understanding. So somewhere on the lines, at some stage, someone's lying. At some point, I don't know. But I that's by the time it gets to the consumer, that's what I've been reading. That there's a lot of deception and manipulation going on. I can find those articles though. I know that's good. That may be different now. Maybe they're getting under control. But they keep saying things like, well, now it's the vitamin E, or now it's this, or now it's that. So I'm so confused by information. I'm really excited that if one of you chose that as a paper, I could stand to learn a lot about that. I don't know enough about that. So anyways, yeah, physical effects of nicotine, very bad. We'll just go there. Is that fair? Yeah, sums it very, very, very bad. Hopefully you guys all grew up knowing that it's pretty well affected that inhaling the ash and 300 carcinogens and all those things are pretty problematic. Well, that's actually a good point. The nicotine is it's got its own little externalities. The smoking itself has so many problems that are created by so many strange things in it. Right, and they're all added together. But the nicotine itself does something that I don't think you were here for this, but the nicotine itself does something really strange that causes a problem that's very unique. It shrinks the small vessels. It doesn't like other stimulants shrink like the larger arteries. Nicotine actually shrinks the small ones. And so really it reduces circulation to a lot of peripheral tissues over the entire body. And so, but it does that everywhere. So anything that isn't like right off the main freeway of an artery isn't going to get a great blood supply. If it's and so that's just how it works for that. So every organ of the body is negatively affected. Unlike other drugs, it's just not quite the same. It just hits different. It hits the arteries at a different stage, basically. And that's why we talked about how when you fall, you get that Fuchs fracture. You can't heal that bone if you're smoking, because it has a vessel that comes in from the wrong side and it's too small. And the small vessels are they're shrunk from nicotine, and it cannot possibly get enough oxygen to heal. So it dies. You get a dead bone. And my experience in the military was that out of 100 students or 100 kids that went through airborne school who I saw that had a Fuchs fracture, only 2 of them even tried to quit smoking. All.
I wonder if you were to put like a heating pad or something on it and continue to smoke.
If you think so, you're thinking it would be worth a try. Yeah.
If the person could quit smoking.
It would be nice to try. Yeah, a lot of the doctors were. I don't know. I think it would be lovely to try, just because there was such a high percentage that literally just said, I'd rather be crippled. 19-year-old boys that just said, I guess I'm going to be crippled. They didn't even try.
Were other forms of tobacco like an option in the military? Like, could they
Well,
still do it?
it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter. Yeah.
Oh, true.
Yeah. Right, because it's not the ash, it's the nicotine. Yeah. No, it's a rough one. It's rough. Yeah. So consider the half-life, 2 hours. This is really different, right, than some of the other ones. Half-life of 2 hours is, and it's got a lot more of an aggressive addiction. So people are, I think there's that image, that PET scan, I think it is, at 3.49 on your page. You can actually see how that limbic section is like lit up with that addictive brain, and now the whole cortex calms down after a smoke. So you can see how there's such an aggressive agitation when it doesn't get a cigarette. And So you may not know this, but with a half-life of 2 hours, if you are a heavy user, you can't actually get a full night's sleep because you have to wake up and smoke. Like, I don't know, that's rough. People get up a couple times a night to smoke. Yeah, and it's a stimulant, but they actually can go back and sleep because in their perceptive system, they are calmer. So they relate to this. Their constructed experience is actually really different than what you would expect. They need a cigarette to, quote, calm down. Have you heard that? Why? Like, tell me why. You know this. Come on, why? Why do they need it to calm down?
Because they've gotten so agitated from the craving.
Yeah. Yeah. The withdrawal symptoms are so taxing to the nervous system that the stimulant is less stimulating than the withdrawal. This is an aggressive, vindictive, cruel cycle. It's rough. So if you can get your clients into what's called a smoking cessations class, have you heard of that? It's called smoking cessations. And usually it's like a 1 to 2 day class. Sometimes they go and it's a support group, but it's an educational class. And in that educational class, they give them things to chew on. They give them all kinds of coping skills. They give them things like access to patches. They tell them about like all the different stages of healing. And I think that if one of you wanted to write a paper on smoking cessations, which your book does not cover, should have, okay? Smoking cessations is a fantastic area of study. Practical. All of stimulants is a great area to study because it's such a widely used drug. But yeah, and stimulants, especially nicotine.
But saying that like only 28% of people get 8 hours a night.
Wow. Yeah.
So it makes sense that people want something.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. We push endorphins. Haven't made our own. And by the way, ADHD brains. I don't know if we covered this or not. Maybe we didn't. It sounds like we did. No, I don't think we did. Like, you might relate to this a little bit. Some of those of you who have it. Trying to make sure that I frame this right. I could just jump into it. I'm probably not going to explain this very well, so I'm just going to throw myself into it and we'll muddle together a little bit, okay? People who are ADHD, so I'm missing a piece of it. Okay, I'm just going to jump into it. You guys basically keep yourself busy all day and keep yourself ramped up so that you can crash at night, so you can sleep, because you don't have the same normal happy circadian rhythm where you naturally come up and you feel coming up around like 9, 10 o'clock. I'm up all the way, and you don't feel yourself coming down at 8, 9 o'clock. And so you keep yourself going so that you can crash, so that you can feel a transition, because you need to transition in order to be able to fall asleep. You need to actually feel like some sort of movement between day and night. And there's something I'm forgetting about why they do that, and I'm apologizing. I'm gonna have to come back to it on a better day. I'm sorry. What's that?
It could be the cortisol.
Yeah, I'm missing a part of it. I'm sorry. Yeah.
I'm like currently medicated, but I wasn't recently, and like I would find that I would get really hyper at nighttime.
Yeah.
Like after school and stuff, even though I was kind of out of it during the day, I'd be really hyper at nighttime because I think like the cortisol curve was.
Well, and working yourself up is a coping skill to try to calm yourself down.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's like trying to like let off steam.
Just so you can crash. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But I get way less of that now.
Yes. I love it.
So,
yeah.
I have these feelings about being medicated, but it's just like, that is one of the big things I noticed that changed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that it's helpful. I really am. Awesome.
That's so cool.
Good.
I don't
Yeah.
know.
You shouldn't feel ashamed of that at all.
Yeah.
So I started taking something because I had a reason why I was sick your first class. My naturopath wanted me to start taking topiramate, which I had a horrible reaction to. I'm on 1/16. Is it 1/16? No, 1/8. I'm on 1/8 of a dose. I have to go to a compound pharmacy and then I have to cut that in half. I'm not joking. Yeah, that's why I was like learning. That's because I went to her and asked her. I was like reading about what was it, the neurotransmitter? I can't remember it. Was it? Yeah, acetylcholine. And I was like reading about it. I was like, anticonvulsants, because that's what I'm feeling. I get up. I feel like I weigh 100 pounds more than I actually weigh because I'm taking like 1/8 of, just like, 10 milligram thing that I'm supposed to be taking like 200 of, or whatever. So, but yeah, it's rough. But so as much as I don't like the side effects, I might see if she'll let me go down to like 1/16 of the dose. Because the interesting thing is my mind, I lose my train of thought and my body's really heavy, but I'm not overstimulated in a way that I've always been in my entire life. It's like, well, is there a way that I can have my cake and eat it too? Because I don't like losing my train of thought, which you guys have seen me lose my train of thought more than I've done in my entire teaching career. Yeah, see, there's, yeah, but I'd like to see if I can have my cake and eat it too. Maybe it's that like 1/16 of the dose will do that because I'm not overstimulated. I have Erling syndrome. I won't go into all my diagnosis, but I have a lot of issues that are all related to overstimulation. So I'm constantly fried a little bit. The world is a little abrasive to me. So that kind of took a lot of that away. It's like, oh, I like this, but I also feel heavy and I can't think straight. So I think that like, we're muddling through, right? We're muddling through. All right. So we kind of already dipped our toe into this, didn't we? Interesting. Yeah. So we might skip on through this, I guess, unless there's more to add. Any thoughts?
Well, I think people are getting a lot more nicotine in, which is something significant about it.
You think so?
People are just like stuck on the vape constantly.
Yeah.
And then like a cigarette. I mean, people chain smoke cigarettes, but it's like I feel like there's still you can't get as much.
Yeah. And also maybe I'm speaking because I feel like I'm processing with you. Maybe I'll join you. Sometimes I try to wait, but there's less social stigma, so maybe they feel less ostracized. Is that possible?
And like now that there's all these laws about not being just outside,
Yeah.
then smokers can't smoke for a portion of the day, whereas like you kind of secretly vape.
Oh yeah. If you vaped in your house, maybe people wouldn't know you were a smoker.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. So you're not constantly trying to cover up for it. Okay. Yeah, what else? What about, because we can talk about the pros and cons. I don't usually go towards like, should we regulate it? Because that's not really up to us. But, but can it help people get off smoking cigarettes? Is that?
I've seen it help people. Like I have friends who were like lifetime smokers,
Okay.
like smoked since they were like 11 or 12, and weren't able to quit, and doing the vape thing helped them finally quit like in their early 30s.
And then like if they stay on this, is that an improvement? And
I don't know.
we don't know yet.
Yeah.
Like, and if it's not, can it be? Like I'm kind of just like maybe grasping a little bit, like
Like having smoked a cigarette before, used to vape before, the cigarette feels really bad for you.
Yeah.
But like feels worse to you than the vape.
Yeah.
I don't know if that means anything.
Yeah. My own sister, by the way, she's a therapist. I'm trying to think of, okay. It's like, well, never putting this one out on the internet. Okay. I'm never putting this one out on the internet. My own sister, has struggled a lot with different issues, and she's had migraines. I've had a lot of migraines in my life too. She's done like CBD, and like she's also done some low THC based stuff, and she's found that that she can get rid of a migraine before it starts, before it hits really fast, or she can do a vape pen. Never tried that myself. I'm not actually opposed to it. You know? Yeah. Yeah. And if it came between that and like the meds I'm currently on that I could barely think on, you know, or something that my doctors have tried before, like Imitrex, which makes me vomit all day. I don't know that I would be like, I don't know that I would judge someone who's trying that. Like, I don't judge my sister. That's what I'm trying to say. You know what I mean? I don't think she uses it a lot, but I don't judge her. I don't know. What do you guys think? I mean, I guess I'm thinking out loud as well. But I'm mixed on this, but I'm not unhopeful.
I mean, to me, marijuana is a plant.
Yeah.
I don't know, I tend towards plants rather than like things made in the lab.
Yeah.
And my friend who does lab is like very, very intelligent.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody feel differently?
No, I feel like
It's okay, by the way, and I get that, by the way. Go ahead.
yeah, I think yeah, in general, I don't have an issue with it, especially if it's for like a migraine. You know?
Yeah. Like if we had to choose this drug or this drug, right? Yeah.
Because I think it can be problematic if people are using it like, you know, more frequently.
Yeah.
But
And I will be incredibly empathetic and supportive of people using THC. And that being said, when we come to the all-arounder section, I will destroy it. Okay? So you see the problem? And I do mean that. Like I think that life is hard, life is complicated. We are muddling through. And we are trying to do the best that we can. The reality is that this is sometimes the best option we have, right?
And I think it depends, like, case to case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
Has like a history of addiction and tends to be more compulsive, and maybe this isn't as good of an option for them as something that they're not going to be like tempted to overuse.
Yeah.
I guess it just, like you're saying, like you don't want to prescribe someone something all day.
No. Yeah, I mean, maybe as NDs, you guys could probably tell me the horrors of Western pharmacology. And I've spent a lot of my, adult life with NDs. I owe my life to NDs, by the way. Like, I lived overseas during the Nepal 2007 civil war. I was 21. For a 21-year-old, it was a pretty fantastic experience. But I came home very, very, very sick, and I shouldn't have lived. And a naturopath fixed me up pretty good. And I don't know why I made it, but naturopath fixed me up. And just like I was sick with your class a few weeks ago, naturopath was the only one that got me on my feet. And I had a connecting thought. So here it is again. But what were we talking about? I'm sorry, guys. I really apologize. Yeah. It's like, that's why we had the discussion in the beginning about what is an addiction and what is dependency. And we had to define this something that was what was it we came to? Working towards, we defined it as something along the lines of working towards degenerative, it had to have a degenerative factor in it, right? And we also needed to add a piece, or we added a piece about I don't know if we had this or not. Maybe we didn't, I don't know. I will hold my thoughts on marijuana, but I will say this, just because we're on the vape pen, even though we're trying to talk about nicotine. It's more like it's an emotional anesthetic. It's not so much that it develops dependency, even though I think that they did figure that out in the last year. But it's not like a strong variable, I don't think. But it's more that it's emotional anesthetic, and that's disorienting to people. Does that make sense?
And it can be visual.
Yeah.
And the thing that was in one of the other chapters was saying that the half-life is like 30 hours or something.
Oh, there's no long time. So long.
Wow.
So long, man. Yeah. Well, yeah, that's so, yeah, the half-life is rough, because you're like define, well, when you talk about driving, maybe we'll get, so we got to save that because that's going to be so much, that's going to be so much fun. Try to talk about driving, define, what's the word they use for in driving? Not intoxicated, but under the influence. Define under the influence. Yeah. So you know, and I could go into my own personal stories with, you know, my own pharmacology. About a year ago, I had to have surgery on my sinuses and nose for something that I'm still dealing with, which is where the migraines are coming from. I'm seeing a surgeon next month again to try to see if we can fix it again. And they put me on painkillers after that. And whew, man, we're not doing that again. I don't know what the alternative is going to be. We're not doing that again. Anyways.
Before they prescribed them, did they ask you if you had a history of addiction?
They did not, and I don't. But
that gets me, like when.
Yeah, but my system became dependent. I don't consider myself addictive, but my system became dependent, and my brain did not know how to sleep. Like totally did not know how to sleep. I had to you know, get really creative and lean on a lot of smarter people than me to learn how to sleep again. So it took a long time. So, and I think that, like, I don't know if being in pain would have been better or worse. It's not obvious.
I mean, THC is an alternative.
Yeah. I'm being recorded, so I'm maybe being tactful, but I think I can say the alternative ended up being 10 milligrams or 10, what do you call it? What is the dose then? 10 milligrams of THC tincture. And every 2 days I went down a milligram until it was gone. And then I was fine. So it took like 15 days, something like that. That's what I ended up doing. Which I know it's legal, but still I feel like it's a sensitive topic, especially being recorded. But that's what I ended up doing after many tears. So, and my family and my parents knew. My all my family were in on it, and we were all talking about it. Like, there's literally no secrets. So, yeah. So, anyways,
like opiates, like just all of these things. It's like it's all about appropriate dosage and appropriate timing and things like that. So it's like maybe an opiate is appropriate for post-surgical pain for like up to 3 days. But the doctors, despite all these new regulations, keep prescribing like 10 days, whatever it is. And like that's just not appropriate.
Right. And
so I feel like basically any drug is probably has a place. Not maybe. I mean, there's a few fringe things that maybe just don't have a place, but like most things do have a place. Just like misuse, use it at the wrong time, wrong dose, the wrong patient, things like that. So we know
things
like the vape pen. It's just like a delivery method. Like maybe that vape pen is an appropriate delivery method for like one hit of THC to having a migraine, but maybe it's not good to be sucking on a vape all day.
And maybe we need to reduce the interval, get rid of the vitamin E, get rid of the popcorn lung ingredient. Starts with an M. I'll remember it someday. You got to get rid of some of the externalities, some of those extra ingredients. And then think about, quantity, and then maybe we'll be down to something a little more reasonable that we have to actually like evolve with. We actually are thinking about it has to evolve basically. Okay. I think so. I think it's something like that. And then it gets more complicated. Coffee pouches.
Coffee pouches?
Yeah, that's not chew. They're chew bags, just like you would put in your gums, but it's coffee.
Just for caffeine.
Yeah, just the caffeine. Yep.
It's not funny.
So this is those weird things. I saw this, I'm like, whoa, like part of me was like, this is fantastic for people who are trying to quit nicotine. And then I was like, this is horrible for people who are underage. Like I was like, this is terrible. This is complicated, man. Like, can you imagine like 16-year-olds who admire someone who chews and they can run around with coffee chew in their mouth? Yeah, I know. Yeah, you get it. You get it. You're just sitting here going, oh no. Yeah, I just know because I work with a lot of people who I have a few clients, and consistently throughout my entire practice, who admire the redneck culture. You have 14-year-olds that.
Or baseball.
Yeah.
That's where I've seen it.
Yeah.
I think they just
Yep.
Do they?
baseball stadiums,
Yeah.
or maybe one particular stadium. Just-
Yeah. So this isn't something though that is regulated, and I'm not saying that it should or shouldn't be. It's just this is out there now. This is a thing. Yeah. And maybe we don't have to reach a conclusion on it other than for you guys to like be aware that people are always innovating. They're always coming up with new things. And I just wanted to come up and find a few things like this. There were so many more weird things that I didn't put on here that I was like, oh, should I put this? Should I put this? Just so many weird things. Like you know how there's like, you know, what is it? The gum that you chew to stop smoking? What do they call that? Is it Nicorette? I was wondering, yeah, I thought it was Nicorette. Yeah. Well, you know, there's brands that are literally not intended to help you stop smoking. They're just intended to give you the nicotine. Like it, you know, it's like, oh well, we went there. Yeah, we just went there. And there's patches that are not intended to help you get off nicotine too. And you know, it's just, you know, it's all out there, or it will be out there. So yeah.
I guess from a harm reduction perspective, it was probably hard to have an alternative.
Yeah, that's actually kind of why I wanted this to be a discussion. Is that like, how long do I have to sit before we realize, wait a minute, there is something here at least. There's something good here, right? Yeah, it's not all bad. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I think it goes again just how it's used.
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely. It's just like our thinking around it has to evolve. I tend to be an optimist. I do. Like, I think that our culture has greatly curved. I really still, if I ever find that little lecture of me like 10 years ago doing a lecture on smoking and how we've greatly curved it, and statistics and citations on how we've curbed smoking in our culture, I'll let you guys see it, because it's fascinating how much we've reduced smoking in our culture. That's evidence we can change. Granted, we tend to like throw a generation on the altar first.
But you kind of have
You
to
know.
see like the downstream effects.
Yeah, but we can change. We don't seem to change without pain, but we do, like you know, we do actually change.
Something I thought that was interesting in reading was that it said that some people believe that coffee like triggered people to start like using tobacco and other drugs.
Like a gateway.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think then? Tell me about that.
I think that
That's a great discussion.
truth to that.
Okay.
Yeah, I know.
I wish I'd thought of this as a discussion question, by the way. So bravo.
In the past, when I had a phase where I smoked cigarettes,
Uh-huh.
but I would only grade one if I was like overstimulated.
Yeah.
And then otherwise, it was like I was addicted to them.
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think there's some truth to that. And then like obviously, I mean, if you were to drink like 1 cup of coffee, I think that wouldn't be a big deal. But obviously, if you're overstimulated, then you want to use something to come down.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I thought that was interesting.
So it's almost like saying that on a chemical level, it's self-medicating, right? That coffee's self-medicating. And so if you're doing any kind of self-medicating, you're opening up on some level to this concept of self-medicating. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, and another component too is like maybe you feel less inclined to make sure you get enough sleep because you know you have this thing that can wake you up and that you'll still be able to function.
Well, that's actually another point. It's actually a separate point that I think is actually brilliant. It's like knowing that metronome dynamic of like there's natural harmonics, there's natural rhythms. Whenever we interrupt that, whenever we intercede on it, do we actually help it? Like with all of this, and sometimes it's dysregulated on its own, and I think biochemically we actually can. That's another. I think we can, but that's not my scope of practice. And with neurofeedback it is, but not with chemicals. Okay. But my point is are we helping it with caffeine in the morning? And yeah, maybe we're not.
But it's like, and I love coffee.
Yeah. It would be easier to, and I have mixed feelings. I actually I actually could argue both sides. I'm sitting here going like, I love that perspective. It feels philosophically pure. The longer I think about it, the more I think I could argue against it. But at the same time, it feels philosophically pure. One historic, well, and I'm not saying I would, I'm saying I could play both sides. I'm not saying I want to either, but playing the devil's advocate, I'm torn, if you can't tell. Okay, playing the devil's advocate, human beings have been self-medicating with chemicals their entire life, and it's possible that through our development as a species, it's come in and out of our, it's actually played a role in terms of like maybe some brain development, and just because something was addictive at one point doesn't mean it is now. Like for example, do you know what I mean?
Like historically, other things are addictive, maybe?
Well, I'm saying that there's the case examples where you see animals having different responses to plants in one region of the country, and cattle that are brought from another region have a different response. And so it has something to do with gut biome and development and factors that are outside of our control. And it's like, it might be more complex than that. Like there is a homeostasis, but we've never actually, we're not known for residing in a homeostasis as a species, right? We're kind of like this progressive moving species, right? So I have mixed feelings on that, but I'm kind of thinking out loud, and I'm not thinking very coherently. I don't know if today's the day I'm going to put it together, but it's a really, really, really good question. I like it. I like your thoughts. I'm torn on your answers. Both really good answers though. It feels philosophically pure. I would rather get up and exercise and eat an apple to wake up than drink caffeine. I'd rather drink caffeine than use cocaine. Okay, right? So
Maybe you don't have time to work out.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
You have like a client.
Yeah, I do. And so like maybe we accept that we're muddling through, right? And that we're doing the best we can. We have grace for ourselves. We have grace for each other. And it's even possible that next year we might be better. That next year I might be working out instead. Is that possible? Like without being judgmental, but actually just being like mindful and as I want to say progressive or just as productive towards that self as possible. Yeah, I don't know. I think we got somewhere productive there. Okay, maybe.
There's just a cultural component to it. Like originally she was talking about like coffee and cigarettes. It's like that's kind of like a cliche, but it also doesn't really exist in our current culture in the way that it would have like 30 years ago, where you can just like smoke a cigarette in a cafe.
Right.
So that was like not necessarily the caffeine itself like makes people crave cigarettes. It's just like there's this culture of sitting around in a cafe drinking coffee, and a cigarette, and like
Right.
You're not allowed to do that most places anymore, so like people aren't really do that anymore. Like you don't have to do it as a select set of people that do that, but as a culture, we don't really do that.
You're right, we don't. You're right.
I guess for me, it was more like sometimes coffee would cause like heart palpitations.
Mm-hmm.
And then like, even though cigarettes don't really cure that, something in my mind told me that it would.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, but I guess I just mean like I said in the reading about like maybe coffee's a gateway drug, so like,
So
like maybe just culturally, because maybe there's like this cafe culture,
Yeah.
smoking cigarettes.
Can I-
That's just more of a cultural thing rather than like something inherent to it.
there's some socialized patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah, like there's I have two thoughts. One is that there's socialized patterns. There's another word for it, but it's eluding me. And then two, you said something really profound there that I wanted to go back to, that the coffee didn't resolve the heart palpitations that may have caused it.
Heart palpitations, and then I said that, and then my mind would tell me a cigarette would relieve the heart
Right.
palpitations.
Do you know
but that
why?
doesn't actually happen.
Do you know why your brain told you that?
Something reading said that it's like relaxing and it's stimulating.
Well, you remember why it's relaxing? Does anybody else remember? No. Well, it's because she was, and she has a paired association. And you don't, it doesn't take much to get addicted. And it's not addicted, it's just paired association. That if you have a couple cigarettes.
But it would mostly happen like after something first caused the palpitation.
Yeah, it's just a paired association. And
So I
it's
had a paired association?
well, we actually covered this before you got here.
Okay.
There's a paired association. It's remember we talked about the researcher that had that sensation that fooled her into thinking that she was attracted to the guy on the date. She was tricked. Okay, there was this thing where she had the flu, and she thought thought that she was romantic. She thought that she had feelings of attraction. She had butterflies in her stomach for somebody. Really, she had the flu. Okay, so the emotions are mostly constructed, and there's a book on that called How We Make Emotions. It's fantastic. A little bit, I mean, it might be a little dry, but I think it's fantastic. Okay, but it talks about how our emotions are primarily constructed. There actually isn't a lot of basis for emotion circuits in the brain. There's sensation circuits in the brain, and then we actually construct our perception based on sensations and contexts, and then we attribute kind of emotions based on culture mostly. And across culture, there's almost no correlation, which is fantastic. But what happens is that you have a paired association with, say, you have let's say you have an experience like 5 or 10 times within a short period of time, like a month or two, of having cigarettes. And you smoke a cigarette and it lights up, these dopaminergic parts in your brain, bam, 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 there's all that stuff going on. And then immediately it starts craving, and your brain kind of learns that there's this angst about 2 hours or about an hour or two after the cigarette. And then it learns, if I have another one, that goes away. It means the sensation goes away if I get that. So then we have this heart palpitation, and for some reason, there's some sort of sensation that's close enough to the paired association that your brain has a false flag, and it says there's a red herring. Your brain goes, you can get rid of it. You're supposed to get rid of it. You're supposed to smoke to get rid of that. It's just a red herring. So it's just a paired association. It's like, get rid of it. You can get rid of it. And by the way, smokers, when you work with these individuals, people who smoke have really, really strong shock. More often than you bet you'd be surprised how many of them don't know that it's a stimulant, because it calms them down so much, because really they're calming down the withdrawal. And and so there are so many things that feel like they're withdrawal, and it has post-acute withdrawals, that there's just so many reasons. Like, for example, they can be sober and off cigarettes for years and years and years and years. They'll feel stressed and they'll immediately want a cigarette. But this isn't the sensation, this isn't a withdrawal. So having a cigarette won't fix it. So this is just an error message. It's just an error message. And you can sit down with them and be like, you're not going through withdrawals. You've been off cigarettes for 3 years. So smoking is only going to crank up your adrenal system it's not going to calm you down, and it's not going to remove your anxiety. It's actually going to provide more endorphins for anxiety. The only reason why you're craving a cigarette is basically an outdated program in your brain that says it'll calm you down. It's not even true.
Yeah, sometimes I smoke and then I feel like I actually feel more anxious.
Yeah, because it's just an outdated program. It's this program is just running. You're like, it's a crappy program that's not deleted yet. It's fascinating, isn't it? And it's just nice to know. It's nice to help explain this to them, you know? It's just nice to explain it to them, because they're like, oh my gosh, you're right. That's what it is. You know, I appreciate you being so open about that, by the way. In whenever someone does that, by the way, like that's a really incredibly vulnerable thing to do. And so I hope that you know that's something that I'm grateful for. So let's see, we only have maybe a few minutes left. I don't want to take you guys too long. So this is probably the last slide. Miscellaneous stimulants, bath salts, caffeine. Do you guys know much about bath salts?
I feel like they're not as popular as they were back then.
Yeah, they got really.
There was a moment.
They're popular in some small groups. I'll tell you.
Yeah, it's like research chemicals or something like people buy them off the internet or at pet shops or something like that. I don't know if they're still selling them, but they used to sell stuff like that at pet shops.
Yeah.
Whatever the technical term is, the pawn shop.
Yeah.
And
yeah, the pawn shops. I always saw those, and I just assumed they were like for bathtubs. Like, oh yeah, you just like sprinkle in the bathtub or something. Like I'm a naive young kid, I guess. What's that?
Was that really bad for you? Like,
I have no idea. I never did it. I just like I see bath salts. I just assumed that they were like salt for bath, like Epsom salt bath. You know, I can't. But no.
Are they the ones that, like, a few years back, people on them were like eating people? So you heard about that a few years ago? That happened. You heard about that happening? You heard about happening in Vancouver?
that was in Vancouver?
Yeah.
It was the house across from mine.
What?
Yeah, my mother was a witness. She had to go to court over it. Yeah. Yeah. She witnessed it. Yeah. Yep. It is as bad. Yep. They lose their mind, man. It does massive damage to their frontal cortex. They lose executive function. Yeah. I mean, not in terms of like they're gonna be in that mental state forever, but and not in like the way that acid can become so permanent, but it does have some permanent damage, yes. And yeah, so caffeine is an interesting one. 85% of public use. There are over 50 types. I think there's like 50 or 56 types of caffeine, and they're very different. They have very different psychoactive effects. Has anyone ever tried like different types of caffeine? Yeah. Yeah, it's a specific. Yeah, it's kind of a foamy green tea. Yeah. Yeah. I think green tea and black tea are just like fermented at different lengths. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So it's just green tea. I think maybe the bigger differences, the ones that we probably have access to, are like, I mean, like you know, there's probably a slight difference in the way that like Coca-Cola feels because it's probably from the cocoa plant. Sorry.
Well, it's also said that in the that some soft drinks, it's the caffeine from decaffeinated coffee.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And
So
it
it's
did
coffee.
mention that plant as well, but yeah, I thought that was
That's interesting. That is interesting. It's fascinating to me. Okay. There's also the mate. I used to drink mate, by the way. I would have like the gourd and everything. I remember like going to my drug and alcohol like staff meeting where we had all the big Morrison group administrators, and I'd like go and I sat down like, because they didn't have any chairs, I sat down like cross-legged in the middle with a gourd sipping from it, and they all thought like I was doing drugs in the middle of a drug and alcohol staff meeting. Like they did not know what that was. So, but yeah, it definitely stood out. So, but yeah, it's definitely doesn't feel the same way as regular caffeine. Caffeine can vary quite a bit. And I would actually, I asked you a question at the beginning about which stimulant do you think is going to have the highest lethality? And I said it might, I had a different opinion. We said cigarettes probably, and cigarettes is probably where you should go. So I have like a petition just based off of some other studies because of soft drinks. Okay, that if you can count cigarettes, if you can count the smoke from cigarettes, then we can count the sugar from soft drinks. And if we can count the sugar from soft drinks, and if the current studies on projections on Alzheimer's are accurate, soft drinks are going to win. That means cigarettes.
Not to mention all the other problems that sugar.
Diabetes.
Yeah.
Diabetes, obesity, and Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is about to triple. So Alzheimer's, by the way, just in case you're curious, it's very likely that the sugar industry is engaged in the same game that big tobacco used to be engaged in. And it's very likely that we are involved in the same complacency and lack of insight, or kind of, I don't know, self-delusion, or I don't know what you want to call it, that we used to be involved in on smoking or
So
nicotine.
someday in the future, people will look back on this time and be like, oh, I can't believe
Yes.
they use sugar. How could they
To this
possibly do
day,
that?
I mean, right now, we're like,
Yeah, processed sugars, yeah. I mean, you guys are, but you guys are exceptional, okay?
We're small.
But I mean, like,
there's documentaries on how sugar is harmful.
You're right.
Sugar's poison, there's thousands of books on it.
mhm. I don't know that people are buying it yet, though. I don't think people are really. So I think that we have to. I think that there's going to have to be, like, we know that Alzheimer's has tripled. The reality is that we can see who has Alzheimer's 20 to 30 years before they're symptomatic. Okay, we know. We can figure it out. We can just look at their brain. Bam, we can see who has it. I looked at someone's brain a few days ago, and she had no temporal lobes. They just weren't there. Just weren't there.
So you're looking at the physical brain or like the brain?
So I was looking at the brainwaves, but I can reconstruct the physical brain. I can do both. It's messed up. I'll show you. So I can reconstruct an MRI with my brainwaves. I can cheat. But it was distressing. Shouldn't have any temporal lobes. But anyways. But Alzheimer's is about to triple, and we will start to care about it. And maybe we're just so saturated in information that I think that, right, some of us do believe, some of us do know. It's not the same, issue as it was maybe with tobacco back in the day, but I do believe that there's large portions of our culture that they don't believe that yet. And maybe it's because, pardon my French, but shit hasn't hit the fan yet. That in 10 to 15 years, when those numbers just triple real quick, because we know they will, maybe our attitudes will change really quickly and we'll start talking about the problem. So I don't think it's going to happen until then, since we're not really motivated yet. There's no evidence that we're motivated yet. So that's my fear.
They need pictures of damaged brains.
Yeah. Well,
I know, like, that's what sticks out in my mind from, like, way back in the day, with the picture of the really gross lungs.
Yeah.
He's a lung smoker.
Yeah. I wonder if that's what worked, Joe. Like, I'm genuinely curious about that, because it didn't work with the Dare to Stay Off Drugs program. We haven't even gone into that, but we have to at some point. I wonder what worked. Like, what changed people's minds about smoking? Was it that we started seeing our loved ones get sick? And then when we start seeing our loved ones get Alzheimer's. I buried my grandfather last Sunday from Alzheimer's. So, I mean, it's not just, it's not that uncommon. What is it? 2 out of 10 people already have it in their lifetime right now. It's about to triple. It's just like, I don't know what does that mean? Most of us are going to get it? What? Like, is that what that means? I have to go back and look at the numbers and confirm that, because I'm still wrapping my head around it. What does that mean? A lot of people are going to get it. So, I mean. So no, there's a lot of things. So there's genetics. There's a couple pillars. This is another discussion, but there's a couple pillars. You got head injuries. You got genetics. You got sugar. And I'm sorry, I'm really, really tired. There's 1 or 2 more things. But we know now that it's related to beta amyloid plaques. That's what causes it. But it's definitely head injuries, sugar, process. You know, we think there's genetics, yeah, but genetics is just one factor, and like you can have like 3 genetic strains and your risk is only like 2%. It's not, or 5-7%. It's not that crazy high, you know. But you can drink a lot of sugar, and they think that the liquid sugars might actually be, because of how they hit your system, the most problematic for it.
Yeah.
Because they hit your system so fast because of the liquid sugars. So it's just one of those things. We're hearing people talk about it. We're hearing researchers murmur about it, and the liquid sugars could be the one that are the highest, you know, risk for Alzheimer's. So not that you would blame those exclusively, but like it's a whole package thing. Genetics, head injuries, toxicity is a big one too. Like mercury, or I've just heard this, so I'm repeating what other people are saying, but I would assume anything that toxifies the brain. So yeah, and then of course the sugar. So yeah, that could be bad. Anyways, I'll let you guys go. Thanks, guys. Yeah, thanks for bearing with me today. I'll come, you know, hopefully more put together next week. You guys have been very tolerant.
Hope you're able to get